and I started to explain why my research group is doing research in resilience hubs. We have noticed that unprecedented changes in the global climate are leading to larger and more frequent extreme weather events such as wildfires, floods, heat waves, and the rapid urban growth and these devastating impacts of disasters and emergencies have challenged infrastructures and social systems in many communities. So we observed that in recent years, unprecedented wildfire seasons is happening in Canada and have resulted in significant hectares burned, mass evacuations, and destructions of infrastructure. In the past 3 years, we have fires every year, and the smoke from the fires came into Edmonton. So, unlike floods and tornadoes, wildfire smoke travel long distance, degrading the air quality across borders. For example, the fires that happen in other areas of Alberta came all the way to Edmonton. Fires that was happening in Canada went all the way to New York. And it's not a concern only in Canada or US, but worldwide. In Brazil, we also see fires and the smoke from the fires impact other cities. And these prolonged smoke events can cause public health crises, mobility disruptions, and urban scale vulnerabilities. One thing that we also note is that the effects are localized. So the way that people understand extreme events can be explained by their own experience and perceptions about climate change. So we need to talk to communities how prepared they are, how they understand disasters, and how they can come together to be more prepared and resilient for these impacts. And who is the most vulnerable? Are people living in informal settlements and those already marginalized are the most vulnerable to disasters because they are usually already marginalized and vulnerable in normal conditions. The number of urban residents living in these areas has increased due to the rapid and often unplanned urbanization. And in 2019, more than half of the world's population lived in urban areas. And by 2050, it's estimated to increase to 68%. So, uh, also, we can see that because people are getting more concentrated, we are having more heat waves impacting people that live in buildings that are not structured to have that heat wave. For example, we don't have ACs. And during the British Columbia heat dome in 2021, we had 690 heat-related deaths, and many of which occur among vulnerable populations lacking access to cooling or safe indoor spaces. As I mentioned, many buildings are designed to protect people from extreme cold, but they are not prepared for protect these people from the heat of the summer days. And as I mentioned before, heat waves are getting more frequent as also the wildfires and the smoke that came from the wildfires. Another problem is that one hazard can initiate more powerful and destructive subsequent hazards. For example, when we have the heat waves happening in the Linton city in British Columbia, the heat wave conducted to a wildfire, and the wildfire forced people to evacuate. So if you don't treat this from the beginning, it can improve to a more hazard and people need to evacuate. So these communities require new ideas and tools to ensure that residents both survive and thrive. And we need to increase their preparedness, response, and recovery capacity in climate and non-climate change emergencies. We need a hub that can holistically address challenge during disasters, but also build community resilience during everyday conditions. Once you are more resilient during normal conditions, you are also more prepared for a disaster. One potential opportunity is to create resilience hubs. Resilience hubs, they can be opportunity to be a critical climate adaptation infrastructure, strengthening community capacity against escalating hazards. we had the preceding hubs concepts. We had evacuation shelters, we had community, and we have mobility hubs. But each of them lacks something. And what are the key problems is that the past concept of hubs have been largely insufficient in disasters. So the shelters usually just work during a disaster. They don't help the community during normal conditions. The mobility hubs just have the concept of transportation, multimodality, that make mobility easier into the city. And the community leagues and the community centers, they usually have recreation activities or other more specific, and they miss the disaster part. And the disaster doesn't need to be something huge that needs evacuation. It can be a heat wave day that need to protect people from that, or a cooling center for these heat waves, or a heat center for extreme cold days. So the strategy is to better collocate resource and enable functionality during disasters and everyday conditions. This will help improve climate equity and can increase community resilience for climate and non-climate emergency. So we need to explore, design, and develop resilience hubs. And now I'm going to ask you to answer a few questions about if you know what's our resilience hub and how do you define that. I'm gonna share here with you guys, and you can just read the QR code with your camera, and then you can answer the question so I can have a better sense if you guys know what are resilience hubs or not. Can you see the screen with the QR code? I see that we have 4 people that know what a resilience hub, 3 doesn't know, and 2 maybe. So let's move to the next question. How would you define a resilience hub? What is a resilience hub in your mind? What do you think it would be a resilience hub?
There's some in the chat, Tayani. Would you like me to read those to you or?
Please.
Yeah, okay. So Rocky put all but cots. Now they say no sleepovers. Bummer. So I think she means in the halls, no sleepovers.
I have here a space for people to gather for relief during climate events, a place people gather to brave inclement weather conditions, a place for community during a difficult time, a space for community residents during poor air quality, extreme heat. It's not always a physical space, but also a group of like-minded people collaborating and heading towards a common goal. A place people can go to during extreme climate events to gather basic resources to cope. A building of people who provide some form of service to the community, homeless shelters, child respite emergencies. All of these are part of the resilience hub concept. Let me share now what we have as a resilience hub. Oh, I don't know here how to clean. There is something wrote and I don't know how to clean that.
We can see the words behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it. So resilience hubs, the definition that was brought by Baha is a community serving a physical space, usually the building and the surrounding area, that is created to support the residents, coordinate communications and service, and provide resource distribution before, during, or after disaster. They have some key goals. First, improve quality of life, provide social service, meet actable outcomes, ensures community resilience, and provide more efficient emergency management. And they can function in three different modes. During the whole year, it's an everyday normal conditions mode where the community is going to have service that they need. And during a disruption that can be a heat wave or it can be a flood, it shifts to a response or disruption mode. And after the disruption, or after the disaster event happened, it shifts to the recovery mode until the community is entirely recovered and then it goes back to the normal conditions. And they go by on major disasters. Resilience hubs not meant to be only a shelter during a disaster. They can be a cooling center during heat waves. They can be a warming center on extremely cold days, a cleanup center during fire events. They can be a charging center during power outage, a training center for disasters preparedness, a community gathering to support food security, and many other things that the community need. So a resilience hub is kind of unique for each community because it's meant to protect the community and provide them the service and resource that they need the most. So usually we survey the community to understand what they need and what they want in their resilience hub, then we can implement that. We now ask you guys about what kind of resource and service we should have in a resilience hub during normal conditions. And then I ask you what kind of service do you want to have in a resilience hub during a disaster? I see many related to the heat waves, water, heat, backup power, food and water, recreation center, rehabilitation. Let me move this. Drug counseling, mental health, a pantry, green space, air purification. And what about during a, it's not just evacuation, but when you need to go to a hub during a disaster or during a heat wave, what kind of service and resource do you think this hub should have? As we can see in this cloud here, water show up again because water is important in both normal and disaster. But we now see first aid. We observe that mental health is again here, but we also have now trauma counseling that is more related to the disaster, not for normal conditions. Power come again. Information is really important as the main one here. So as we noticed here, by the answers coming from this little survey, the service and resource is going to be a little bit different from normal conditions and for disasters. And we also have here some possible resource that you should have in a resilience hub based on what the community needs. It can be a place where you have physical activities, where you have mental health programs, where you have gathering places for the community, gathering post-education activities, post-education recreation for the kids, power, water. And when you go to a disaster, we have information, water, first aid. It can shelter if it's necessary. I know that not all community lakes have the space and not all of them we need to be a shelter, but it's something that can be part of a resilience hub in other places, in other cities where you have more fires that impact people and they need to evacuate and shelter. So we now have a sense of what a resilience hub and what kind of source you guys think that should have a resilience hub, but where you think should be located a resilience hub. Let me see here. How do I do this? Okay. It is the same places that I had in my survey. We ask people to choose how satisfied they are to have one of these places retrofitted to a resilience hub. We have here library, recreation centers, community leagues, religious buildings, schools, universities, government building, shopping mall, stadium, local park, or another place. Almost everyone answer here. So we have a very similar answer that I got from my survey from the general population of Edmonton. Community leagues, recreation centers, they were the ones that people most want to have, and also schools and university. Here, universities was a little bit down, but libraries also show up as something that should be retrofitted into a resilience hub. Are you sure? My survey answers, so very similar. Community centers, schools, community leagues, universities. People were very or somewhat satisfied to have these places retrofit into resilience hubs. And we asked then, how are these resilience hubs gonna be a place for you? Are you going there to have resource to normal conditions? Are you going there to have a temporary evacuation shelter? gather critical resource, what they want. And most of them pointed that they're going to a resilience hub during a disaster to either get information about the disasters. That was one of the resources that we saw here in the survey with this group that I'm presenting, get critical resource during a disaster, and as a temporary evacuation shelter. A little bit fewer people said they are going to use a resilience hub during normal conditions. But when we did that survey with underserved communities, we observed that low income and other vulnerable communities are going to use their normal conditions more frequently than the general population. And we also saw that people, they are likely to volunteer during normal conditions and during relief efforts. After we understood that people would like to have a resilience hub in libraries, community league halls, and recreation centers, we created different scenarios to understand if you get all the community league halls and retrofit them into resilience hubs, or if you get all the libraries or all the recreation centers, what scenario was going to be the best one? And the community league halls was the one that we got the best scenario, where you could cover larger population, because we have more halls located in the city and it could cover larger neighborhoods. And we observed that walking and public transit has a little bit difference. It's not that much difference. The distance that you can travel from the community league hall to reach the population. By bicycle, you can go further, and by car, we could reach the entire city because the city is autocentric, so it was not something that surprised us. And few takeaways that we got from our research is that resilience hubs were preferred at well-known places. What they want is a place that they already know, a recreation center, a community league hall, a school, because it is something that people are already used to go. They know the people who's going to be there. Accessibility, especially for individuals with disability, was important for all groups that we surveyed, the general population and all the vulnerable groups. Transit connections were highlighted as a key feature because during disasters, we may not have the opportunity to get a car and go to the resilience hub. So we have to think about how to connect these hubs with transit and also to ensure that walkability is enough and the accessibility is taken care for the people to arrive at the resilience hub. We also observed that underserved groups would take personal vehicle or walk to resilience hubs in both conditions, with a higher walk-in rate during normal conditions. But for those who doesn't have a car, the walk was their option during normal conditions and was even higher during a disaster. So if a community has a lot of people that do not have access to a personal vehicle, we need to think about how to ensure that the sidewalks are large enough or are accessible enough for these people to arrive at the resilience hub. Groups would use the hubs at similar rates when we think about different underserved groups and the general population. But underserved populations would use resilience hubs during disasters at a higher rate, especially for information and resource, than during normal conditions. We also observed that trust and compassion had a positive impact on using a hub during a disaster. That's why people choose place that they know, because are place that they trust and the place that they have connections with the community. I also believe we add a variable called believe that a resilience hub would help increase the social cohesion in my neighborhood. It increases the likelihood that someone is going to use a resilience hub. So when the community has more, when they believe that this resilience hub can help increase social cohesion, we can assume that more people are gonna use these resilience hubs in a disaster or during normal conditions. And those who are part of a community organization or a group, they're also more likely to use a resilience hub during normal conditions. Again, because of the trust and compassion, because they know each other, they know who is going to be there to protect them, to interact, to give information. So resilience hubs have a promised future. It can help the communities to increase their resilience to climate change. And they can build social cohesion and preparedness for a variety of emergencies, not only a huge disaster, but it can be for small emergencies that we observe, heat waves, extremely cold days. And now I will go ask some questions about community leagues as a resilience hubs. Let me share the last piece of this. What service does your community league currently offer that make your community resilient to climate change? What I see here is that garden show up and air purifier and air condition, but the majority said unsure. We don't know if they're having something right now. So what service could be offered to increase your community's resilience to climate change? I see that some of the leagues doesn't have a building. Funding is to have this financial support is important. More gardens, air filters, backup power, smoke shelter, community networking, community dances or events, a shelter. What else? Water, food banks. Food banks is always something that came in the research about resilience, how that should be part of a pantry, especially for not only for a disaster, but during normal conditions as well, because some people have food insecurity during normal conditions, and during disasters they get even worse because sometimes the resource doesn't came to them during a disaster, or they have to allocate the money to another thing, and they can't afford the food. And what service would make your community more resilient in general? Not only for climate change, but what service do you think would help your community be more resilient in general? We have community events, air purifier, affordable housing, food bank, mental health, communication, houses of yards, recreation activities. Would you use your community hall as a cleanup center during wildfire smoke events? Oh, I forgot to put the options. Let's assume option 1 is yes, option 2 is no, and 3 is maybe. Sorry about that. Yeah, half. You're like more maybe now. I think this was the last question. Okay, I have a last question. In the context of resilience hub that I explained here that can go beyond major disasters, what other purpose would you use your hall for as a resilience hub? Tornado shelter. Yeah, we had a tornado that destroyed the what's Edmonton Mall, if I'm not wrong. Heat relief, stress relief, cold relief, community connection, childcare, warming area, discussion, flood shelter, wildfire shelter. All of these can be a resilient hub. You can go to resilience hub for all of these, depending on what the community has more of these hazards. Rehabilitation. That was the end of this. Let me go back. So that was the end of my presentation. I'd like to acknowledge our funders, the City of Edmonton, Alberta EcoTrust, and Mitex.